You are listening to the Overthinker's Guide to Joy, episode 39. This is the one where I talk about the 3 pieces of advice I would give to my teenage self. Let's dive in. This is a podcast for overthinkers, overdoers, and overachievers who are tired of feeling over-anxious and just want to feel better. I'm your host, certified life coach, Jackie Dukrenis. Hey there, and welcome back. So it's been a busy couple of weeks in my house. My youngest daughter is getting prepared to graduate high school, and we have a bunch of family flying in for the event. It's going to be all of her aunts, uncles, sisters, and even one of her cousins. So it's going to be kind of a combination graduation family reunion, and I'm really looking forward to it, although there's been like a lot of angst around it. Weirdly, this milestone has brought up a ton of emotion for me. And maybe it's obvious because it's like my last little bird getting ready to leave the proverbial nest at the end of the summer. But something about having one or more children live under my roof for the last 28 years, I am now experiencing like true preemptive empty nest syndrome. And I have a ton of conflicting feelings. Somewhere between like wistful and elated and uncertain but excited, nervous but celebratory, and mostly grateful and proud. But something about this particular graduation, again, because she's my youngest, has got me feeling a little bit more introspective than even with my other 2 girls, which was also emotional, but different. And maybe because it falls like on the heels of my own 40th high school reunion just a few weeks ago. But I was thinking about my own high school graduation day. And the truth is, other than a few blurry photos, I can't say I remember a single thing about it. I don't remember if I felt relieved or proud or happy or sad. I just remember that I was very eager to go away to college and start my adult life. Now, the interesting thing was, the biggest surprise for me was that when I graduated college 4 years later, none of the things that I had planned for actually happened. I didn't stay at the college I originally applied to. I transferred after 2 years to a different university. I changed my major. I changed my plans for graduate school. I didn't end up going to graduate school. I changed my career path goal. I wanted to be a doctor. I became a television executive. And the point was that I had it all planned out when I was 17 years old. And at 21, I was starting from scratch. So instead of, like I said, pursuing my lifelong dream of going to medical school, I ended up taking an entry-level job in the entertainment business, working as an assistant for a film producer. And I was fired after 6 weeks. Well, technically I quit, but potato. The producer I worked for was a classic, arrogant Hollywood producer and a bit of a bully. Not unusual at that time. Probably still is not unusual, but it was the 80s. And he was the kind of guy who would come in every morning almost like he was in a bad mood. It's like, how do you show up in a bad mood every day? You run your own company. You're a producer 3 blocks from the ocean in Santa Monica. You just got nominated for an Oscar, maybe even won an Oscar. I can't remember. But he was just always in a bad mood. And he would like walk by my desk and grunt at me to get his herbal tea. And then he would sit down and do the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning. And I wasn't his primary assistant. I was what's called a second assistant. So technically, I really worked for his assistant, not for him. But that was my job, was to get him his herbal tea when he grunted for it and to read scripts and then write what's called coverage, which is basically just the synopsis of the script and what I thought of the script. And it was one morning, about 6 weeks into the job, when he finally had a meeting in his office. He rarely did. He usually went out for meetings, didn't stay in. But some people came to his office and they were seated in his, like the living area of his office. So on sofas and chairs around this glass coffee table. And of course he bellowed for his herbal tea. And as I came in with his hot herbal tea, I saw that the table was glass and I said, "Do you need a coaster?" And he's like, "It's a glass coffee table. What do you think?" And I looked around for coasters and I didn't see one. So And I thought, well, at my house, we use coasters on a glass coffee table, but he didn't have any in his office. So I figured he thought that was okay. So I put down the tea. But I remember my cheeks turning like bright red in front of all these writers and producers that he was sitting with and feeling stupid and embarrassed. And after the meeting, he later told his assistant, his primary assistant, that I needed to step up my game and do better. And so the other assistant, who was like a few years older than me, but he looked much older because he was so beaten down by his thankless job and this obnoxious producer, he was sort of waiting for me to say, oh, I'm sorry, absolutely I will do better next time. But I was so embarrassed and confused and annoyed. And I just kept thinking, I worked so hard for 16 years in school and took all these really hard classes. And now I'm the second assistant to this lame producer who barks at me to get his herbal tea. And he wants me to do better because I wasn't sure if I should use a coaster or not. And I took a long pause and I said to the primary assistant, I don't know how to do better. So I think I'm just going to quit. And I did. And by the way, this was the only time I ever quit a job in 30 plus years in my entertainment career. But right afterwards, I thought it was surely the end of my Hollywood career. Like there would be some kind of permanent blacklist that would be passed around and nobody would ever hire me for another assistant position again. And then that would be it. I had a 6-week career and it was over. But as a side note, that producer who fired me or who I quit with, he came in to pitch to me many years later when I was a television executive at 2 different networks. And I was in a position to either, buy his idea or not. And it was so much fun to pass on his projects. And here's the thing. He never recognized me. I mean, I had a different last name, but it wasn't that many years since I had worked for him. But he was so self-involved to remember the 6 weeks that he would grunt past my desk every morning. But when that happened, I would always think about that great quote that somebody told me on my first day in Hollywood, which is, be nice to the people on the way up because you will see them on the way down. And it just really resonated with me because I finally was in a power to be like, no thanks. I'll pass on that. But anyway, I digress. The point of this story was about how 40 years ago, when I was graduating from high school, I thought I had figured it all out. I thought I had a life plan, and my plan took a big detour. In fact, many detours. But as Jon Kabat-Zinn says, you cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So I learned to metaphorically surf. I'm still a terrible surfer. But I did it many times in my career and in my personal life too. But unfortunately, what I didn't learn, even though I was adaptable and I learned to pivot and I learned to work hard and I was successful, I didn't realize that I had attracted or developed a very bad pattern. I made a habit, unconsciously of course, of always attracting very difficult people into my life. Mostly bosses, but it showed up with some friends too. I must have been so traumatized by quitting my first job in entertainment and so fearful that nobody would ever hire me again that I overcompensated by staying in really toxic environments much longer than I should have. And I didn't recognize the pattern, nor at the time did I have the skill set to break the pattern. I just continued to tolerate bad behavior after bad behavior, and it was Hollywood, so there was a lot of it. And I overcompensated by overworking, walking on eggshells, and becoming a people pleaser, which maybe I always was, but I think it got worse. And life has a funny way of showing you the same lesson over and over again until you learn it. So on the precipice of my daughter graduating high school, I keep thinking about what advice would I give her or my younger self if I could do it all over again. Well, I think I'd probably have a laundry list of things, but I thought for the purpose of this podcast episode, I would identify 3 big ones. The first is stop taking everything personally. This is such a common mistake made by so many people, especially women and especially me. I was always the first to assume someone's bad mood or mean-spirited behavior had something to do with me. And I have a habit of thinking that everything is in my power to make people feel better, happier, or just fix everything. And it wasn't until I had my first coach that I learned this valuable lesson. Most things are not about me, which means they're probably not about you either. So if you have this habit of taking things personally, check yourself and recognize before you start taking that on, their bad mood, their bad behavior, their bad habits, and step out of your own ego and notice that it's probably a reflection of the person who is misbehaving, not what you are necessarily doing or not doing. But if you indulge that bad behavior by normalizing it, kowtowing to it, or not setting a boundary, you're perpetuating it. And then you keep attracting it. Yep, that was me. If only my 18-year-old self had learned that when she graduated high school, that would have been super valuable. Certainly in selecting my boyfriends, my friends, and later on, tolerating the bad behavior from so many bosses in the workplace. I would have saved myself a ton of drama and angst. So here's the second piece of advice. Learn to reframe your thoughts. You've heard me say this on multiple podcasts. It's the work of Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School, who talks about your thoughts create your results. Thoughts are powerful weapons, but they're also powerful gifts. So if your brain is wired to assume the worst and you think it's protecting you by doing this, think again. Teaching yourself to find a different thought about a circumstance can liberate you, it can empower you, and it can stop your overthinking, over-worrying brain. Now the third one, learn to put on your own oxygen mask first. That is, if you don't learn to take care of yourself, that's mind and body, first, you cannot successfully help others. Many of us think by always helping others, we will build up good credit with our friends and family. We think that in turn, they will take care of us. But I know from my own experience, as well as from clients and other friends, when we're always running around trying to meet everyone else's needs, we are invariably left feeling depleted, or even worse, resentful. Because when others don't reciprocate or show gratitude for all that we've done for them, we feel marginalized. We feel resentful. Now, how do you recognize this person? And maybe you recognize it in yourself. But this is the person who volunteers for everything. This is the person who's the one who always offers to take you to the airport, even during rush hour. They're the ones who pick up your kid from school, even though they always pick up your kid from school. Or they plan parties. And I don't just mean because they're social, but they're just the one who's like, oh, I'll plan it. They're the one who organizes all the group activities, buys the group gifts, makes sure that everybody signed the card. Now, if this sounds like you, just recognize you might be a people pleaser. I am definitely a recovering people pleaser. And people pleasing is a habit we established when we're little because it was probably a coping mechanism for something else going on in our childhood. And I'm going to do a whole other podcast on that later. But at some point, people pleasers start to feel like everyone expects them to always be that person. And ultimately, it makes them feel taken for granted, often left out or even invisible. So just to recap, here are the 3 things I wish I could have told my younger self at my high school graduation. It's not personal. Learn to reframe your thoughts and put on your own oxygen mask first. Here's the funny thing. I know all of this now. I coach on this every single day, and yet I even still have to remind myself when the pattern shows up again and again. So if you want to change the habit of attracting difficult people or overcompensating by trying to please everyone, just be aware of it. Just be on to yourself and be patient. Because here's the thing, it's a practice. So prioritize yourself, practice your good daily habits, and you will start attracting the right people and the right opportunities in your life. All right, friends, I look forward to talking to you next time. Have a great week. and bye for now. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Overthinker's Guide to Joy. If you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe or follow this podcast so you can always be in the know when the next episode drops. If you would like to learn more about working with me as a coach, you can connect with me through my website at JackieDeGrenis.com. That's JackieDeCrinis.com.